Okay, cool. Welcome everyone. So today we are fortunate to have two distinguished speakers, Joy Chen and Jin Chang. So and I will speak English. So but we can ask questions in Chinese because the speaker will mainly speak English in their session. Today we'll talk about some very interesting questions that will be appealing to many of you. So I'll first introduce the context of this webinar and introduce one of our speaker, Jin Chang. So for this webinar is co-hosted by the PKU Alumni Association of Southern California and co-hosted by the PKU Association of Washington State, and also supported by many associations in North America. So thank you for all of you to supporting this. And I'll introduce our first speaker, Jin Chang. He is probably many of you already know him. He is a managing director and CEO of Himalaya Capital. He went to Peking University in 1986, and in 1996 he got his MBA from Columbia University B School. In 1999, he founded freetonight.com and an internet startup, and he had been having multiple startup experience since then. In 2001, he joined Chinese Media Night Inc., American Chinese media company, and become COO. And then in 2006, he became he joined the Himalaya Capital as and then in 2008 he became the partner of the firm, and in 2013 he became managing director and also serving the role of COO. And Himalaya Capital, in case some of you don't know, is a multi-billion-dollar kind of investing firm based in Seattle. Besides all of this, he is also the former chairman of the Peking University Association in Southern California, and he is currently the vice chairman of PUAA of Washington State. So with all of that, welcome 师兄 Changjin 师兄 Jin to start.
大家好. It's my great honor to introduce Joy Chen, our renowned expert in career development and executive coach, and a great inspiring speaker. LA Times call her the networker. Well, she's graduated from Duke University, got her BA degree in East Asian Study. Then she went to UCLA, got her MBA and MA in urban planning from Anderson School of Management. So after she graduated from a business school, she worked as a real estate developer. Then she was recruited to become the deputy mayor of Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, at age 31. Very young age. Well, that's very rare for a young lady to become a deputy mayor of a major city in the United States. And she spearheaded the city's education and the workforce development projects, which her work still have profound impact in the city. Then she joined a executive search firm and become a headhunter to work for Fortune 500 companies in North America, Europe, and Asia. Then she founded her own boutique executive search firm. And she also founded Joy Studio and wrote 2 books. One is called Don't Marry Before Age 30. 30岁前别结婚. The other book It's called How to Get Lucky in Your Career. 30岁趁势而为. Both books became very popular in China, especially among the white-collar ladies. I heard a lot of story about her. And she was very, very popular in China, and became a role model for very many successful, professional women in China. Then she just came back to the States and also founded, it's called Joyous. Joyous, okay. The website dedicated to executive coach and career development for executives, professionals, and young people, especially women.
For Asian Americans, women and
for
men.
Asian American, yeah, that's right, for Asian American. Okay, so she's also my friend, as for 10 years. Helped me greatly, and also helped. She served on the advisory board of Peking University Alumni Association of Southern California when I was the chairman there. And she had made a great contribution to our association. Gave a lot of, gave free seminar, and also coach many of our alumni and young people in their career development. And so it's she is my role model as well. My inspiring role model. So it's great honor for us to have her here. And as everybody know, we in our career development, at work, Chinese American, are always part of the workforce who get a job done. But when we talk about promotion, and we are not the favored choice of our bosses. So that's really frustrating. We are criticized for us for not have the leadership skills, not have the communication skills, weak interpersonal skills, kind of don't really have the motivation to help others, very passive, very selfish, whatever. That's a lot of the criticism we received. Is that true? How do we break this, whatever you call the, glass ceiling or the bamboo ceiling in our career development, right? Let's hear what Joy is going to say about this. And I'm pretty sure her experience and her knowledge in this area will help all of us greatly. Thank you, Joy. Yeah, now I give the speaker to you.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Jean, especially. Jean, my dear friend. It is such an honor to be with you, to be introduced by you, to be with all of our friends again at PKU. It's been maybe 12 years since I last spoke with you in a setting like this. That was always in person. And I always feel when I come to PKU like I would never have been able to qualify to get into PKU as a student. So I feel especially honored to be able to come back and to be able to be with you all, like this. So thank you all for welcoming me to talk about a subject that is of huge importance, I think, to all of us. How do we actually achieve our American dreams that we have worked so hard to get to? I've prepared a little PowerPoint presentation. I do not believe in boring presentations at all. I hope that this is a lot of fun, and that's it's as fun as it is educational. I am looking forward to a fantastic Q&A afterwards, So please make note of any questions that you want to ask, and Jean will be moderating a discussion with me. I'm going to share with you a few slides. Don't feel like you have to copy them all down. If you are interested, I'll give you my email address, and you're more than welcome to email me. I'll be happy to share the slides with you. So here we go. Can everybody see this? Yes, yes, can you see it? Okay, good. Jean, can you see this? The slides?
Yeah, I can see it.
Good. Okay, great. So what is the Asian American glass ceiling? You know, Asian Americans now are 6% of the population, but we are 12% of the workforce. So we're heavily overrepresented in the workforce. We love to work and companies love to hire us. The problem is we're not getting promoted, as Jean alluded to earlier. We're 12% of the workforce, but we're only 1.5% of Fortune 500 corporate officers. So what's going on and how can we all be successful? If we do what many of us, Asian Americans, try to do, many of us believe that success in the United States comes from two things beginning with the letters H-A-R, Harvard and hard work. Many of us may be spending a lot of time and resources to help our kids get into Harvard, give them a good head start in America. But what we're seeing is that generation after generation of Asian Americans are making it into the Ivy League and are making it into great companies, but are not moving up. So what's going on? Well, this is a typical corporate pyramid. You know, as Jean said, I worked as a CEO headhunter for 7 years. So I worked in HR. Before that, I was a deputy mayor where I was helping people to get the skills. So to succeed. So I've worked a lot in this corporate pyramid. And what we're seeing is that Chinese are being overrepresented at the bottom, okay? But at every step up, our rate of promotion falls behind even further every other group. So the Asian Americans are the least promoted group in America. This is a very different problem than faced by, say, African Americans or Latinos, who often are having trouble even getting into college and getting into these companies. But once whites, Blacks, Asians, and Latinos get into the companies, Asians are promoted less than anyone else. I'll give you an example. Goldman Sachs, we are 27% of the US workforce of Goldman Sachs and 0 of their corporate officers. So this is a very, very difficult problem, I think, for all of us, because what's happening is Asian Americans, for the first 30 years of our life, for the first 25 years of our life, it looks like we are America's highest potential people. We get the best grades. We get into the best universities, 20% plus of all the Ivy League universities. We get into the best companies like Goldman Sachs. But then around age 30, just when we should be putting to use all that education and all of that hard work to soar, that is when we plummet from being America's highest potential group to its lowest potential group. This has huge ramifications for us. I mean, it's ironic because I wrote 2 books with the word censure in them, but now I'm seeing this as an Asian American problem. Asian Americans have a problem at age 30. This has huge ramifications for us. First of all, in terms of wealth, you know, in America, wealth is built intergenerationally. So Asian American families are investing a huge amount of time, money, and resources to get their kids into the Ivy League schools. We spend a huge amount of money in tuition at these schools, but then we're not getting that return of investment that we should be getting in going on up. And since wealth is built intergenerationally in America, this is a huge amount of loss of wealth for us individually and us as a community, for our families, as well as for ourselves. That's not to mention the huge amount of confusion, disappointment, frustration, and even shame that many Asian Americans face, because we assume that education, success in America will come from our individual education and hard work. And when that doesn't happen, that can result in a huge amount of shame. So at this point, you might be wondering how I figured it all out. So let me just tell you, Jean gave you my official bio. I'll just tell you a little bit about sort of the personal side. This is my family. That's me growing up. I was born in 1969 in Maryland. That's me in the pink and white sweater. In the middle is my father's mother, my nanai, my little brother, and my parents. My father immigrated from Nanchang through Taiwan and went to MIT, where he got a master in engineering. In 30 years, in a 30-year career, he managed one person, the blind guy, because no one else wanted to manage the blind guy. My mom went to Cornell. He's from Shanghai, went to Cornell, got a master, Boston University, PhD, spent an entire 30 years career working in a laboratory, never managed anyone. So one night when I was about 12 years old, I was with my father, and he said, oh, tonight's the night of my company's my department. He worked for the government department Christmas party. I said, oh, why don't you go? And he said, because every time I go to those things, I don't know what to say to people. And that night, it was like a lightning bolt had crashed down on my head. I realized two things. One, my father and I had the same problem. We didn't know how to talk to white people. And the second thing I realized is this problem would forever limit his life and his career in America. And so that night, I said, you know, I want to do something more. I don't just want to go to an Ivy League school and then work as a technical worker bee somewhere. I want to change the world somehow. But I didn't know how, because, you know, at school I was so awkward. Like I mean, especially when the kids were joking around, it was just awful. So that night I decided to figure out how mainstream American society actually works so that I could get in there and try to do something. Many, many, many awkward and humiliating social situations later, during my 20s, I graduated Duke. During my 20s, I had some really great mentors. And at age 31, I was appointed deputy mayor of Los Angeles. I learned how to connect with American society, and that made my career really take off. After deputy mayor, as you heard from Jean, I became a CEO headhunter. I went to China for the last 10 years, where I was a well-known career expert for women. Wall Street Journal did a major, profile of me, print profile, 3-minute video profile of me, calling me China's American leaning guru. Now I'm an executive coach just for Chinese Americans and Asian Americans. I came back from China in August of this year, and I'm seeing 3 generations later, Asian Americans facing the same frustrations that my father faced. My father died during the pandemic, but so it's too late to help him. But I feel very passionate about saying now we can help the current generation of Chinese Americans and Asian Americans to figure this out and figure out how to jump out of the worker bee mode and to gain access to opportunities at all levels of American business and society. So that's really my mission now. So today what I want to talk about is 3 things. Number one, I already talked about what is the Chinese American and Asian American glass ceiling. Next, I'm going to talk about how do companies actually choose leaders. I know, because for 7 years I did the choosing. Following that, we're going to talk about what are the reasons for the Asian American glass ceiling, the 2 reasons why it exists. And then I'm going to show you the 3 ways, the 3 steps that we all need to take to smash the Chinese American, Asian American glass ceiling. So first, let's talk about how do companies actually choose leaders. And for this, we can go back to psychology, and in fact, evolutionary psychology. In fact, organizational psychologists and social psychologists have found that only 2 factors account for 90% of our positive and negative impressions of other people. Those 2 factors are warmth and competence. Now, in this context, it's important to note that warmth doesn't just mean being nice. Warmth means, it's a very specific definition, the ability and tendency to connect emotionally, not cognitively, but emotionally. Competence is, are you smart? Are you capable? So why are these 2 things so important? Well, scientists think it goes back to evolution. As soon as you meet someone, you want to know, number 1, is this person friend or foe? Is this person going to help me or hurt me? And competence, is this person capable of doing that? Now, the way that we were raised, let's call it the Harvard and hard work success doctrine, or the way that we assume, we work on showing everyone that we're really competent. But in Western society, warmth is more important in leadership. So if we plot these 2 factors on a 2x2 diagram, like organizational psychologists do, we see that, let's plot warmth on the y-axis here, high warmth on top and low warmth on the bottom, and competence on the x-axis, low competence to the left and high competence to the right. If we look at leaders who are what we call cold incompetence, these are people who, let me just make this screen a little bit bigger. These are people who you sometimes see in big companies at the very low levels. These people don't belong as leaders, but sometimes, someone gets promoted at a low level. In the tan circle, we see what people's emotional reaction to them is. They hold these people in contempt. And the blue circle, we see what people's physical actions are to them. They undermine them. Okay, so we don't have to think too much about cold incompetence. Let's look at warm incompetence. These are people who are very warm, so they're good at attracting people to them. But after the people realize that they're incompetent, they kind of drift away. So these people don't make it too far up in great companies. Let's say they're in lower middle management. Where things get interesting is in the lower right corner, the quadrant of cold competence. These are people who are very smart, so people respect them, but they don't really connect so well with the people around them. So people won't put in the extra effort. If people are really cold, they're often known as asshole bosses, and then people will actively undermine them or be passive aggressive towards them. Okay, so leadership happens in the upper right quadrant of warm competence. These are the people who everyone admires, and followers will go to bat for them. So when we search for leaders, we're looking for these people. They're sometimes known in the literature, in the organizational psychology literature, as happy warriors. These are the people who make you feel really reassured. And when you're with them, you'll follow them because you think that everything's going to be okay. So can you think of anyone who is a warm, competent leader? Well, I would think of, for example, US Senator Tammy Duckworth, who actually literally is a warrior. She, deals with so much politics, so much negativity, and yet she's always so positive. She's always so strong. Okay, so in the Western model, the warmth actually exceeds the competence in importance when we're choosing leaders. So now that we know what we're looking for in leadership, this warmth, which is, we would say in HR, warmth would say in organizational psychology, but in HR we'll say EQ, and competence. Let's look at what are the stereotypes that Americans have of Asian Americans. Here are the traits most strongly associated with Asian Americans. I don't know if you can read them, so I'll read them out to you if the type is too small. Constantly in pursuit of more power. obsessed with competition, think they are smarter than everyone else, striving to become number one, motivated to obtain too much power in society, compare own achievements to other people's. To get ahead of others can be overly competitive, enjoy disproportionate economic success. In other words, these traits, Asian Americans are firmly in that lower right corner of cold competence in the stereotype. Okay, so where do these stereotypes come from? These stereotypes are incredibly, incredibly damaging, obviously, because anyone who behaves in this way is never going to get real followership, right? So where do these stereotypes come from? So there's two things going on here. Number one, there's a culture gap between our cultures, Chinese cultures, and many Asian cultures, and Western cultures. Chinese cultures are what organizational psychologists would call a high power distance culture. This means that organizations are more hierarchical. I was just in China the last 10 years, and I saw this every day and how meetings are run. Things are very orderly. And the way to, kids are taught to study very, very hard. We all work very, very hard. And the way to succeed in a high power distance culture is to be very outstanding, be modest, work hard, and keep your boss happy. Western cultures are what are called low power distance cultures. Kids are taught from the time they're 3 to play, to make friends and to be a friend, and to create those emotional connections. In Western organizations, power flows not through hierarchy, power flows through influence. And under these circumstances, to become seen as a leader, you must connect emotionally, not just with your boss, but with people at all different levels in your organization, inside your organization, as well as outside of your organization. Most US companies are run the Western way. Immigrants comprise 71% of Asian American adults and only 17% of all American adults. So since it's the mainstream society that sets up most of these companies, the companies are run the Western way. And that puts those of us who are immigrants who grew up in a totally different culture at a real disadvantage, because we may be operating still on the rules of success of the cultures that we came from. And no one tells us that the rules are totally different in Western society. So one barrier that we face is this culture gap, which kind of infuses all organizations and many of our social interactions as well. The second major problem is unconscious bias and stereotypes. I showed you the stereotypes that Chinese or Asian Americans face. These stereotypes create massive problems for us in the workplace because the way that our brains work, we all have unconscious bias. We look at anybody and immediately our brains, because we're getting millions of bits of information coming in, but we can only process a very small amount of that data consciously. So stereotypes are just part of the way that our brains organize information. So someone will look at us and say, oh, Asian American. Immediately what happens is they will lump all those horrible stereotypes onto you. This happens unconsciously, okay? You might say, oh, well, that's okay. As soon as people get to know me, they will see that I don't behave that way. But that's not the way that stereotypes work. After they assign these traits to you, something else called confirmation bias sets in, so that you may behave 9 times out of 10 in a way that's incongruent, not like those stereotypes. And they won't notice that. But the one time that you behave that way, they'll be like, boom, just like all those other Asians. And the stereotype will become even more fixed in their mind. That's how stereotypes work. And that's why it's so hard to root out of companies, because it happens unconsciously. Asian Americans suffers from something else called role incongruence, which means that our overall stereotypes of us as smart, hardworking, and lacking leadership skills raise the bar for us to have to be even better leaders than the average Joe, because we're constantly having to prove that we are leaders. We don't get the assumption that we are good leaders. We are constantly having to disprove other people's ideas of us and leadership. So you can see why these stereotypes become very self-reinforcing, because not only is all of this happening, that people are getting these views of us, they're reflecting, their behaviors are reflecting their views. So they are behaving, constantly giving out these like little signals that reveal how they feel about us. They're called microaggressions, being interrupted or whatever, so that over time, we have to be, the bar is raised for us to behave more leaderly, but the environment may not feel safe enough or comfortable enough for us to reveal our true selves. That's how unconscious bias works. And so these are the things that we have to deal with. During the pandemic, just a fun side note, 20 years after I got my MBA, I went back to Cornell and for grad school for the first time, and I got a certificate in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So all this organizational psychology is from that, and it was absolutely fascinating and very eye-opening, because it really helped me to see more clearly all these forces that, you kind of sense it, right? I mean, I think as Asians, things happen in the workplace and you're kind of like, is that racism or is that not racism? And now I really see how this kind of exclusion happens. It's very real, and it has a huge impact on our careers. So let's just step back for a second and review, because I've given you a huge amount of information here. What is the Asian American glass ceiling and why does it exist? Number one, we are America's most educated group and the least likely to get promoted. So the reason why I created this graphic is like this is the Asian American glass ceiling isn't like a slab of glass, like a ceiling, like you might imagine. It's actually a lot more insidious. It's more like a haze of air pollution that is hard to see at first, but over time, it stifles the career of nearly every Asian American. It exists because Western low power culture is based on influence. However, Asian Americans are perceived as hyper competent and hyper disconnected or hyper unfriendly because of three things that kind of make a continuous cycle. One is stereotypes of us as hyper competent and hyper unfriendly, which, by the way, leads to anti-Asian hate. Just on this, just put a quick pin on this, there is research that shows that in times of social upheaval in society, cold competent people who are perceived as cold competent are the ones who are attacked. So this explains, these stereotypes explain the anti-Asian violence. The fact that we're always perceived to be outsiders. We're always perceived to be excessively competent and excessively unfriendly. So there's three things happening. There's stereotyping, there's immigration. Immigration, because we're getting China's best and brightest, like PKU graduates, who are hyper competent. We are hyper competent. And immigration leads us to be hyper disconnected because obviously there's a massive language barrier because Chinese is so different from English. And there is a culture gap. And then the third piece of this is our upbringing, that I think a lot because of, like, my parents, they pushed me really hard to go to a top university because I think they kind of perceived, they saw in their own career that they were limited, and they wanted to prepare me the best they could. And so they pushed me to get into an elite universities because they thought, well, that's the best way that they can help me, right? So they pushed me so hard to get into a great university. But while they were pushing me growing up, they said, oh no, don't waste your time playing. Don't waste your time doing all these things. Don't waste your time socializing. So that upbringing actually kind of disconnects us from other people growing up. And in a certain way, does also lead us to see other people as kind of just competitors, when in fact, in Western society, we must be hyper connected. The only way to get beyond all of these things, these factors, the unconscious bias and the culture gap, in my analysis, is to become hyper connected. So what I've done is I have created something that I call the Asian American Leader Success Roadmap to replace the Harvard and hard work doctrine. And what this does is it brings us from the age 30 problem of highly competent professionals, where we have all the hard skills and all the technical skills that we need. We're really smart and competent. And it transitions us to becoming a high impact leader in the Western context. There's 3 steps to this. Number 1, we have to learn the game. We have to understand how Western companies actually choose leaders, how to play politics. Politics are different at every company, and politics are different at every level. We have to become aware of them, and we have to understand how to play the game and ace the game. Number 2, we have to grow those connection skills. What is EQ? EQ is actually a set of 15 specifically defined emotional and social skills. When I was a CEO headhunter and now as a coach, we gave these CEOs and rising CEOs, there's assessments, scientifically developed assessments where we actually can measure your EQ along each of these 15 subsets and compare you against North American leaders. And this provides a roadmap for us to coach you against. So we need to grow these EQ skills. These 15 skills, we can put them into 3 categories. First one is we become very deeply connected with ourselves, really understand our emotions, really become very independent, define our emotions as separate from other people, like emotional boundaries. The second part of that is that we become deeply connection skills to others. And the third component is that we can use all these connection skills to solve complex challenges, to say, not be carried away by emotions, to break down all the business problems in society, separate facts from emotion, and figure out a path forward and implement a path forward. Give you an example, vaccinations. You can say, how do we get society vaccinated? That's not just a logical thing. There's also emotion, right? Every complex challenge involves both facts and emotions. When I was here it is. Oh, sorry, we're under Grow Your EQ. So when I was a CEO headhunter, my firm, Heidrick and Struggles, our chairman used to say, search would be easy if there are no human beings involved. In fact, the law would be easy if there are no human beings involved. Politics would be as well. And so every business challenge involves facts and emotions. So that's that third category of EQ skills. And the final third step is that we need to build our networks. Again, build our networks, develop mentors and sponsors within our companies, build our networks within our companies and also outside of our companies. So I'm going to leave you with this, but I'm just going to leave you maybe one hot tip on how we can start. I'm happy to, we can talk about all of this. I'm happy to break all of this down. There's a lot behind each of these steps. But before I conclude, I'm going to leave you with one hot tip on how we all can travel down this success roadmap, or help our kids to travel down the success roadmap. And it is LinkedIn, which might be a big surprise to you. But I've been back since August, and I've been working on rebuilding my own networks, because most of my networks were back when I was deputy mayor, and that was a long time ago, especially in internet years. And I have been absolutely amazed at what can be done on LinkedIn, especially for those of us who have language gaps, culture gaps. We may not feel super comfortable always socializing with other Americans. We may not feel comfortable going to happy hours or going to all the business lunches that a lot of Americans go to. Under those contexts, LinkedIn is an incredible way to build your network and establish yourself as a thought leader, because LinkedIn is right now quickly expanding its social media tools. Many of us think of LinkedIn as just a place to put our resume. Well, in that case, our LinkedIn brand hurts us, our online brand, because actually we all have an online brand, whether we know it or not. If your online brand, and it happens on LinkedIn, LinkedIn is not just for changing jobs. Every time people have meetings now, they often go to LinkedIn and check you out, or they decide whether or not to have a meeting with you, but come and check you out on LinkedIn. And if on LinkedIn, all you have is your resume of what you've done in the past, then LinkedIn actually hurts you, your online brand, because your past and your current situation is impacted under the glass ceiling. So the world can only see what you've done in the past and cannot see anything about your potential or what you can do in the future. So LinkedIn now has all these tools where you can put in your thought leadership. You can write about what's happening in your industry. You can write 3 lines. You can upload your academic papers. You can do so much on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is your new resume, but it's way bigger than that. LinkedIn is your portfolio of showing the world everything of who you are. Who are you? What are you thinking about now? What can you do in the future? This is where you can do that. So you may think, oh, it's so hard to start. Just spend like 2 weeks looking around LinkedIn. You can start commenting, because here's a hot tip. LinkedIn is very different from other social networks like Facebook or TikTok or Instagram. On those social networks, most people who are on do post at some point. But LinkedIn, less than 4% of all members actually post actively. That means that LinkedIn needs more content. So on Facebook, if you're on Facebook, if you post something, your friends will see it, but only a small subset of your friends will see it. LinkedIn is the opposite. If you post something and somebody likes your post, not only will your post go to your network, your post will go to that person's entire network. And if someone comments on it, that person, your network will see that comment, and that person will see that. So if you want to meet anybody, and there's amazing data that shows like how many CEOs go on LinkedIn every single day. If you want to connect with a CEO or a potential major client or somebody, start following them on LinkedIn. And when they post, write a comment. Don't just say, oh, great post. Say, I liked how you made this point, and how about this? Add to the conversation. At that point, that person will see your comment. That person's entire network will see your comment, and your entire network will see your comment. So commenting on LinkedIn is like the fastest way to start establishing yourself as a real powerhouse and thought leader in your industry. So I'm just going to leave that with you. If you are interested in seeing how it's done, there's different things you can do. You can add your picture in, you can add a cover image. You're welcome to check out my LinkedIn and just so you can see all of my activity and see how I'm doing it. You're welcome to interact with my posts, and all of my influential networks will see you. I still have all my networks from when I was a CEO headhunter. But let's connect on LinkedIn, okay? And I hope that all of you who are interested in expanding your careers will take a good look at your LinkedIn profile and start keeping it more up to date and start commenting and posting your own thoughts. Finally, I'll leave you with, as part of my commitment to the community, I've created something called the Asian American Leaders Network on LinkedIn, which is totally free. And every single week, I give a live stream training on one of the facets of those 3 points. How do you learn the game? How do you grow your EQ? And how do you build your network? So I give a very practical training every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific. You are more than welcome to join us. To apply, I'll approve you all. You just go to my website, getjoyous.net. And if you have anything you want to, here's my email, joy@getjoyous.net. If you are interested in these slides or you have any questions or want to follow up with me in any way, here you go. It is joy@getjoyous.net. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. And I'm really looking forward to a great discussion. Let me stop share now.
Yeah, wow. It's very, very powerful. Lots of powerful messages and tips. It's very eye-opening and enlightening for me. If I had heard you 25 years ago, that'll make my life much easier.
No. Jean,你是我们大家的榜样。
Well, now it's time for Q&A. Let's set a little rule here. Okay, everybody, if you click on the bottom of the Zoom window, you will see a little smiling face. It's called reactions. You click on reactions, you can see a raise hand button. Okay, if you have questions, you can raise your hand, and I will call your name. So if you don't raise your hand and you don't have the right to ask question, okay? So I will just take my privilege to ask Joy questions. So everybody welcome to ask questions, and you are encouraged to ask questions because it's a kind of really great opportunity for us to be able to talk to Joy and ask her question face to face. So let's start. Anybody who wanted to ask the first question, raise your hand.
9 o'clock better.
Oh, okay. I don't see any hands. Well, let me ask you the first question then.
Okay.
Yeah. So to set a network, we have to really approach people. So I remember in the past the talk I attended 10 years ago, you were talking about networking as well. You talk about the strong links in your network and weak links in your networks, right?
Yeah.
So Chinese we do have a lot of strong links because kind of the personal tie. With our families, friends, and all these things, we tend to be a small circle. But how do we utilize our weak links, to approach other people? Because for Chinese, by our culture, it's not easy for us to talk to strangers or people who are not really familiar with.
Yeah.
And how do we approach them?
See, this is where LinkedIn is incredible. LinkedIn started its social media elements in 2012. So it wasn't around then when we spoke last. Mm-hmm. And what's so amazing about this is, especially for people who are more introverted, you don't have to go to any happy hours or business receptions or make any small talk. You can just see which people are online who think like you do and are interested in the things that you are interested in. If you just type in something on the LinkedIn search bar, you can just look for posts on something that you're interested in and comment. So you don't have to have any social interaction at all. And I think that is, that solves the problem. I think you can just do it on LinkedIn and you can write it. You don't even have to talk to them, right? I know that many of us, English is a huge, huge barrier. I know, I've worked in China. It's hard for me to work in Chinese, and it's very hard to work in a second language. But many of us, I think, our written English is more comfortable than our spoken English. And so we solve that.
Great. Now, Susan Meng, can you ask the question? Please unmute yourself first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So I just want to hear some advices from you, host and hostesses, about the preferences of some financial companies in hiring new employees. Yeah, just like JP Morgan Chase or Bain Capital or some other financial companies. Thank you.
What kind of employees do they like?
Excuse me. As I'm a Master of Arts, so I want to land a job in a financial company. Yeah,
Yeah. I think the thing about these financial companies, as I had mentioned earlier, Goldman Sachs is a, very outstanding company. They're hiring Asians big time. 27% of their US workforce is Asian American, and we're only 6% of the population. So I think the question is, I think you can get a job. The question is, what happens in 5 or 10 years? And I think that, one thing that is, I think, a barrier to many Asian Americans is that we're getting into the Goldman Sachs of the world, but we're going into the back office functions like IT or research.
Yeah.
But oftentimes the ones that get, make managing director or whatever are the front office, the sales positions, because the professional services firms, whether it's a law firm, banking or whatever, they hire people who bring in the money, right? So I think that if you want to work in those kinds of professional services environments, your EQ skills become incredibly, incredibly important. In fact, all those 3 things, because those are sharks who work in those companies. They're sharks, meaning how would you translate shark into Chinese? These people, they really know the game and they really play the game hard. And they have very high EQ skills and they have very strong networks. So I think that if you really want to get into financial services, that Asian American leader success roadmap that I gave you is incredibly important, all 3 of those steps.
Okay, next, this Y. Yeah, I just saw Y there.
Yeah, your name. So yeah, Joy, thank you for your presentation, and I think a very insightful observation there. I feel the same with your kind of insights. But I think I want to talk about a slightly different kind of aspect when get promoted into kind of higher leadership. So sometimes people say, oh, the first class leader probably hire first class leader, but the second class leader try to hire a third or even kind of fourth, right? So to that kind of, from that perspective, then if Asia kind of people are in the kind of, in terms of competency in the first class, right? Then when we encounter the second class or third class managers, they are not going to promote first class people. They just kind of incompatible to some degree. So what do you think that kind of aspect may impact the kind of promotion opportunity for the Asia people?
Well, I think that there's, I think that American companies do not look at talent that way. I think that that's a very Chinese way of looking at talent. Like we say, actually in Chinese, you say, you know, why does a man get a B woman and the B man get the C woman? American society doesn't talk that way in terms of hierarchy. That's a very, you know, after we get into Harvard, after, you know, in school, everything is so hierarchical. But American companies do not just look at talent from the standpoint of competency, like you're talking. Warmth is more important than competency to American companies at the top. So let's say, you know, you have, like, in your words, competent and competent. This person might be a little bit lower, but if this person is much warmer and competent enough, you just have to be competent enough, okay? You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. In fact, oftentimes the smartest person in the room spent so much time and energy becoming the smartest person in the room that they have very low EQ. You know, I've interviewed a lot of people who went to Harvard, and in my very unscientific analysis, maybe a third of them are super outstandingly successful now. Maybe a third of them are very average. Like you meet them and you're like, oh, you went to Harvard? You know, they're not that successful. And maybe a third of them are like total losers. Like, you know, they're 50 years old, they're still wearing the Harvard sweatshirt. You meet them, you're like, oh, tell me about yourself. Well, I went to Harvard. You know, like they talk about Harvard all the time, you know those people. And they're just kind of like, people just think they're kind of annoying, right? So you can say, 这个人很优秀, like went to Harvard, but that doesn't mean they're a great leader. A great leader in the Western context is exceptional at connecting. I made a little video, I'm going to post it on LinkedIn this week, about the Fortune. I don't have, I wish I have, I don't have the chart here. I made a chart. I researched the current CEOs of the 10 most powerful companies in the US, the Fortune 10. Made a chart saying, what are the companies' names, who are their CEOs, and where do they go to school? Out of all of them, you know what schools they went to? University of Nebraska, Auburn, like only one of those 10 went to an Ivy League school. So you might look at them and say, not that competent, not as competent as me, but these people are exceptional at connecting. They are exceptional at knowing the game, playing politics. They are exceptional connection skills, and they have exceptional networks. So I think it's really a matter of saying, just being competent will make you a great worker bee, but that doesn't make you a great leader in the Western context.
Okay, let's go next to Andrew. Andrew, can you turn on your mic?
Yeah, sure. Well, Gene, thank you so much for hosting this. And also, Joy, thank you so much for your time and insights so far.
Hey,
So
Andrew.
I'm Andre. I'm a college student, and I kind of just want to ask this question on behalf of college students. So I mean, and I'm actually a senior right now. So in a few months, I'll be entering into the workforce full time. So I'm just wondering if you have any tips or recommendations for, well, first, how to make the best first impression on my first team, first manager, and so on. And also kind of looking into the longer term, how to just position myself best in the industry going forward.
Great. Well, I think that roadmap that I gave you, those were all things to really be thinking about. Once you get into a company, you know, learning the game, when you're, you know, you just learn every single day. Don't just put your head down at work. If you're in a meeting, anytime you're in a meeting, meetings are the perfect place to learn. Look around and say, who's the most influential person in this meeting? Might not be the highest title person. Say, what is this person doing? Why is this person so influential? How many times does this person talk? What are they saying, right? And then look around and say, who's the least influential person? You know, there might be someone that everyone thinks is kind of annoying. I'm like, well, what is this person doing wrong, right? I think that my advice would be, even starting now, start being hyper aware of human dynamics, like in every situation, not even in a business meeting, just among your friends, or look around and be like in school, who's influential and who's not, and start practicing those kinds of skills. Because I think those three things, you can be doing them now: learning the game, growing your connection skills, and building your networks. I think you can do that as a student now.
Yeah, great question, Andre.
Yeah.
Next, Lin He.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Okay. Hi, Joy. Thank you for your great, very powerful presentation. I currently work at finance startup Brex as a engineer, data scientist. And I think from previous questions, guest question, I think there's a huge cultural value difference from Chinese culture and the Asian culture. I think for me personally, it is hard for me to recognize, say, oh, do I want to play the politics?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of not what I was taught, right, in my education. Yeah. So it's like, feel like I'm not being myself. And there's also like, as Asian girl, like we're more,很乖, like submissive. Like, so it's hard for me to say no or having a confrontation with my boss. Like if there's something, like sometimes I feel like I need to get their permission. So that's like kind of my question, like how do I get unblock this, obstacles? And then there's actually a request. I'm part of the Asian at Brex. Like we have a Asian community. I don't know if we could have you over as a guest sometime.
Okay.
Of course,
send me an email. Yeah, send me an email. I am making, as my schedule permits, I am making time to speak to Asian organizations as much as I can. So send me an email or send me a note over my website.
Okay.
About that.
Okay, we'll do that for that.
But then on your other question about what we can do, there is a huge culture gap, and I feel that. I mean, I had so many difficult, humiliating situations along the way, and I think that this is why a lot of people lack confidence. There's been a lot of talk recently about something called imposter syndrome, like feeling like I'm not worthy to be in this environment. And I think on one hand we can say, well, why do I feel this? Why do I lack confidence? A lot of it is that environments have a lot of unconscious bias. They look at you and these stereotypes, they don't expect you to be very leaderly. And then there's something called, you start out as a pet, and then as soon as you start becoming strong, then you become a threat. There's something called from pet to threat. There's nothing in between, right? So there's just a huge amount that's going on in terms of the unconscious dynamics in companies that make it very difficult for us. And I think that that's why it becomes even more important for us to become hyper aware of how we are coming across, how we are presenting ourselves, how we are being perceived. All of those skills are the 15 skills of ER, right? Of being incredibly self-aware. We have to have even stronger EQ skills than other people. We have to know the game even better than other people. And we have to have even stronger networks than other people to break through the glass ceiling. And very few people break through. But I think we can all be pushing forward. It's not easy. It's not easy. I know it's not easy out there. And that's why, Asian Americans suffer under such a thick glass ceiling.
Right. Okay, thank
Okay.
you. I'll contact you offline.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you, Lin He. And the next, Wenting Zhao. Wenting.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for thanking and especially thank you, Joy, for the great presentation. I noticed this is still recording, so I chose not to show video. I just want to I have a quick question about just wondering if you have any tips about raising not just being an Asian American, but raising Asian American kids because I recently become a mom, and when I talk to my neighbors, some Chinese neighbors, they have their kids just study like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day, and then I would look at them. I was thinking, hey, that's how I grew up. But I just want to see like how should I educate the next my next generation, and like from your experience, the way you grew up in America, well, from an Asian family. I'm just curious, do you have any tips or any suggestions?
Thank you for that question. I don't think that studying from 7 a.m. until night every day is very beneficial for helping kids succeed in a Western context. I know that people do that in China, but I don't do that with my own kids. I have two girls who are 10 and 12 now. And I kind of feel that the most important thing that I can do as a parent is to help them be very, very strong socially and emotionally. And I want them to have very strong self-identity when they go out into the world. And so I'll give you so basically, you know, every night at dinner, what we talk about is the drama report. What's going on with this friend group and that friend group? And, you know, at 10 and 11, 12, they're kind of at an age when they're just navigating. Social relationships start to become very important to them. And they have, you know, a lot of little problems trying to figure things out. And we talk through all the problems every single day. That's what I really focus with them a lot on, like, oh, so-and-so is mad at me and so-and-so said something and what should I do, you know? And rather than tell them what to do, you know, my real focus is always to try to, number one, express empathy, like, oh, I'm so sorry that person said that to you. That was really unkind, right? And then the next thing is, well, what do you plan to do about that? You know, to empower them and to be kind of like a coach to them. Well, what do you think? What are you going to do about that tomorrow? Well, I don't know. What would you do? You know, they might say to me, and I say, well, you know, if they need some help, I try to give them as little help as possible to think through their options. Maybe there's 3 different options of things they could do, and say, well, what do you think will happen if you say this to her? You know, and then maybe help to role play with her, you know, of, okay, well, pretend I'm your friend and you just practice. So we practice these. So these are the things that I work on with them. I try to always express empathy for when they're feeling bad about something, but the next step is always, what do you plan to do about it? And then give them as little help as possible to support them to come up with their own solutions, because I don't want them to suddenly go out into the world at college or after college and be totally unprepared to deal with all these social situations that they will deal with every day. So I guess a lot of my focus is, you know, on trying to create a balance of academic as well as emotional and social development throughout their childhood. So I want them not just to be smart, but smart and self-aware, very socially capable and happy.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Wenting. Yeah. Next, Adelaide. Yeah, you got to turn on your mic. We cannot hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, okay, great. Hi, Joy. It's very nice meeting you today. I also graduated from UCLA Anderson School, so it's great. Yeah, yeah, great to meet alumni. I currently work for a high-tech company, and I'm doing marketing. So it's a kind of interesting environment, as they are like a handful of Chinese with a background like me, and female leaders are pretty rare, and most in fact, in my organization, all the female leaders are either white or African American.
Yeah.
So my question is like, in this kind of environment, do you have any tips and tricks for me in terms of how to find my ally and how to break through in this kind of environment?
Yeah, you know, Asian American women, the statistics are even worse than for Asian Americans in general. And Asian American women, among all women in the workplace, are the least promoted. So Asian American women are promoted less than whites, Blacks, and Latinos. So it's hard because oftentimes you will be the only one. And when you are the only one, then the stereotypes and all of those unseen forces become even stronger. I know, because I was the only one many times during my career, including when I was deputy mayor, when I was a real estate developer. I think it's, you have to work really, really hard on building your networks, finding mentors and sponsors. How do you find a mentor? I actually wrote a LinkedIn post. Maybe I'll just pop it in to the link, and you can read this on your own time. I wrote a post which was quite popular, specifically on how to find a mentor, because that's really important. Every successful person has had mentors, and so you need them too. And so I wrote a post on this. You need to. Oh, that was a direct message. Hang on. It's your relationships will be much more important than ever. So develop those relationships, one-on-one relationships. You know, ask someone who's kind to you. Ask them to go to coffee with you sometime, and check in with them after a meeting. How did I do? Do you have any tips for me? I think that you need to be more careful than ever in developing personal relationships with people and not just having the professional relationships.
Great. Next one, Lily Chang. Can you turn on your mic?
Yes. Hi, Joy. It's very nice to meet you, and thank you so much for sharing. I really learned a lot from it. I'm also a college student. I'm actually a junior from USC. So you're sharing, you emphasize the importance of like having the skills to connect with others. And I do want to get some advice from you about like how to develop the skill in college. I do agree with you that instead of spending more time maintaining a high GPA during college, we should like spend more time like stepping out of the comfort zone and interacting with more people from different background or even like different race. But my problem is as someone who is very introverted, I'm very afraid to like talk to new people because especially I feel like in the States, there are a lot of people who appear to be very like aggressive, or like there are many people who have like completely different characters from me. So like, would you like to share some advice about like how to form connections with new people, or you could like also share about your college life, like what you like learned from it, or just something like that.
Okay, thank you, Lily. I think that I really understand that a lot of other people can behave in ways that are very different from what we're used to. And that it's hard to connect with them. But that doesn't make it any less important. to start to learn how to connect with people of every background. That was such a hard thing for me to learn, but that has been my superpower. And that is the superpower of people who are successful in American society. They can connect with anyone. So let me just leave you with one little tip. When someone, first of all, everyone loves to talk about themselves. So if you're going to try to connect with someone, you can start off saying, oh, are you from LA? What brought you to LA? Okay. So then they're going to start talking about their story. They're going to be all happy talking about their story. Or you can just ask them something about something that they're doing or something that they're reading. And then whatever they say, just say, well, that's very interesting. Tell me more. And then they're going to keep talking and talking. And then they're going to really like you. So, I think that one thing is to be very well read, spend 30 minutes a day expanding we have to be T-shaped thinkers, right? We have our own area of study, but then broaden yourself. Spend 30 minutes a day reading, at least 30 minutes a day. I spend hours a day reading. Read the news. At the bookstore, you can buy 5 different magazines in areas that are totally different from what you normally know about. Make your knowledge base broad so that you can talk to anyone about anything. So one, I would say, be a T-shaped thinker. The second, I would say, just start asking a couple of questions. Where are you from? And, well, that's very interesting. Tell me more. You don't even have to know what they're talking about. And then they'll be all happy with you. And sooner or later, they'll say something that you can latch on to and, participate in the conversation more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
good
makes
question,
sense.
Lily.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, the next one, WK. Can you?
Hi,
Yeah.
this is Wenjing. Thank you, Jean and Joy, for the seminar. So Joy, can you please elaborate a little bit on this from pet to threat that you were talking about? And then do you see any different stereotype toward Asian women versus Asian men?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, if you go to any women's conference, there's always going to be a panel on imposter syndrome. And I just wrote a thing on my LinkedIn this week about how there's a very interesting Harvard Business Review article. Maybe I'll send you this link about how imposter syndrome is, let me just send this to you. Imposter syndrome is very much a problem that's faced by women of color. Why is it that women of color are the ones who face imposter syndrome and white men don't? Well, because, at conferences or whatever, we always say that imposter syndrome sounds like some kind of a thing, your sickness. And imposter just sounds like a criminal, right? So it sounds like this is a problem with the individual. But if it's just us, non-white males who are suffering from imposter syndrome, I think we need to really think about to what extent is imposter syndrome created by an environment that is unfriendly to people. One of the ways that the environment is unfriendly to people is, especially for Asian women, from pet to threat. When they first hire you, they love you. Oh, so cute, so pretty, so small, so competent. But then as soon as you start getting stronger, start voicing your voice, you jump from being the pet to the threat. And it's like, oh, this woman's quite aggressive, quite assertive. You might be exhibiting behaviors that are lauded in white men. And so in many environments, it might be that you go directly from pet to threat and there's nothing in between. That's what the pet to threat is. That is something that people like, that's a DEI little term that's become a little bit trendy.
That's right. I was hoping that you can elaborate on like how we overcome that, especially on the
Yeah,
threat
you know,
part.
the pet to threat, I think you really have to become extremely cognizant of how you come across and develop strong relationships with powerful people who are kind to you. You know, seek out people who are a little bit nice to you and start developing those really firm relationships. And have them start to protect you. You know, if you see a promotion that you want to go for, just ask them, hey, do you think I'm ready for this? Is this something that you think you can help sponsor me for? Ask their advice, ask their opinion. A lot of people are happy to give you advice. And then when they give you advice, then they feel kind of like obligated a little bit. It's just psychological. They feel like, oh, they want to see you succeed, right? Especially if you start putting their advice into action, they want to see you succeed. So I would say, try to establish relationships with powerful people who seem open to having relationships with you. In this earlier link, I gave you specific advice on how to get the mentors that you need to succeed. Take a look at those tips in there. And some environments are just too toxic. Some environments you just can't, you can never succeed. So I would say, before you go into an environment, as you're evaluating switching jobs, ask around, look for Asian women in that company, find them on LinkedIn, ask them, hey, what's it like to work there?
Yeah, we still have a few minutes to ask more questions. I highly encourage everyone to take this wonderful opportunity to ask Joy more questions. Now, good. Abby.
Yeah. Hey, Joy, thank you so much for the presentation. It's great, a lot of great information. So I just have a quick question about in the workplace, how do you develop personal relationships?
Okay.
Any tips?
I would say that, well, I guess it's kind of hard on Zoom right now. But, you know, if you see someone in a meeting that says something that you think this person seems kind of friendly, you know, you might just send them a note on Slack or something and say, hey, I really like that point that you made. Can we talk about it a little bit more? Or, you know, I would say, look for opportunities and excuses to leverage off points that you see being made in meetings and try to talk to them afterwards. I would say also, it's very important. Meetings are big battlegrounds that you might not even know about. You know, meetings are places where people are everyone's evaluating you. If you're being super quiet and you may say, oh, it's probably too risky for me to speak out, but you're the person that doesn't speak and never speaks, they are evaluating you, and they're evaluating you as not a leader. I think a lot of times, you know, the way that we were brought up, we might feel like, oh, unless I know an answer is totally, totally perfect, and I have all the data to bring it up, then I'm just going to be quiet because I don't want to open my mouth and or say something wrong. But other people at the meeting, they're just brainstorming, right? They're just throwing out ideas. And so what happens is you're trying to not look dumb, but you're ended up looking like not a leader. So I would say, in terms of building the relationships, people like winners, and powerful people want to sponsor winners. So if you're looking like a loser, or like you have no potential in meetings, they'll be less open to having a relationship with you. But
yeah,
you coming across looking like an up and coming leader, then they'll be like, oh, I want this person in my tribe, because you'll make them look good when you do well, right? So I think a lot of this developing the relationship is, you know, coming across as a confident, connected leader, connected with yourself, getting over those barriers of feeling unconfident. It's hard. I'm not saying any of this is easy, especially in environments that are filled with unconscious bias, especially because we're raised a completely different way. So I totally get how hard these things are, but that doesn't take away from how important these steps are.
Yeah, great question, Abby. Thank you. Next, Ping Long and Joy Sunny, you will ask the last question.
Can I ask 2 questions?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. First question is, they ask one question that seems not get answered. So how is Asian man got perceived or stereotyped? I'm not exactly sure what was the original question.
Yeah. Okay, and then what's your second question? I'll answer them together.
Well, second question is, hey, Joy, do you see, I'm in a high-tech company. It seems like we're okay, right? We get promoted, and some of us even get promoted into leadership positions. Like, is there any difference between a tech company? Maybe tech companies does not have this glass ceiling, or maybe it does, but we did not feel it or did not see it.
So the question is about the tech industry?
About Asians in the tech industry, or, especially Asian men.
Okay. Well, first of all, in the Asian men, the data shows that Asian men do better than Asian women, but that Asian men do suffer from this glass ceiling. There is a report also specifically about the Silicon Valley that does show wide disparities. Now, if we look at actually this one statistic that 12% of the workforce is Asian American, but 1.5% is Fortune 500 corporate officers. 1.5% of Fortune 500 corporate officers are Asian American. If we break that down between East Asian and South Asians, the numbers become much, much starker. It turns out that South Asians, meaning Indians, become CEOs at a rate 6 times East Asians, mostly Chinese, and 3 times more than whites. Indians become CEOs at a rate 3 times more than whites. Look at Sundar Pichai at Google, Satya Nadella at Microsoft, and they're immigrants, right? So if we take out Indians, then the numbers for East Asians become even more dreadful. There is data that shows that these disparities cut across Silicon Valley the same way they do other industries. If you're interested, there's the report on this is by Ascend, which is a nonprofit Asian organization that looked at Silicon Valley promotion rates. But these are mostly looking at large companies, like they were looking at Cisco and Google and 2 others, HP and another one. So, it might be different in different companies. I'm sure it is. I'm sure that, maybe different startups are different. I'm sure every company is different. Every company has its own culture. So if you're in a place that you're not feeling glass ceiling, well, that's fantastic. As far as Asian men, the stereotypes are generally that they're nerdy, hardworking, no social skills. So, so I think it's even more important that if we take away one thing from tonight, I would say, do not just put your head down and work. That's not going to get you to the top. Then you'll end up like my father, America's highest educated, hardest working worker bees.
Great.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Maybe we just, stay at our current level, don't look up, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? You don't have to get to the top. I'm not making any value judgments on what is success or what you should strive for. Those are personal questions for you. My only concern is I want to give Chinese Americans and Asian Americans access to opportunities at every level of American business and society. That's my mission. So I'm just here to try to give you access to them. Whether you decide to go through or not is on you, is up to you, but I just don't want to see the glass ceiling that's limiting you. Okay.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Joy. It's really noble.
Well,
yeah, next, Joy Sunny.
All right, thank you, Joy. Great name, great presentation. And sorry that I could not turn my camera on. I'm in an inconvenient situation. The question for you is that it's interesting to hear that you just came back from China. You've been there for 10 years. So the question is that with the current US-China interaction, the tension there, how Chinese American can, act to help the situation and to make our own career development, living environment more constructive.
You mean because of Americans' hatred toward China, like the China virus and racism?
It's part of that. And this current rivalry mentality existing between US and China.
Yeah.
So as Chinese America, for example, you who had, career connected to both sides, what can we do to make the situation better?
I do not know. I mean, I think the situation is very, very grave. I don't feel any power or influence over this. I think the situation about Taiwan is very grave. I think that the situation for US brands in China is very, very grave. I'm friends with the president of distribution at Disney. They've had some major movies this year that were pulled from China, are not allowed to be released. I do not have any answers on how to make the situation better. I'm very, it's very sad. I have many close friends, millions of fans in China. And I am not that optimistic about the future of the relations between the two countries. And it's outside of my expertise. If I could make things better, I would make things better, but I don't feel like I have any influence over that.
Yeah.
Maybe Jean would be the person. Jean, what do you think?
Well, I think we just need to work hard here to make our life better. Yeah. And I totally agree with you. It's basically nothing we can do about the situation. The only thing we can do is just try to work hard here to try to protect us and to make our life better, to make our second generation, third generation, the APR community in general easier and better here. Next, Jasmine. Jasmine, you will be the last question. We're not going to accept more questions. Yeah, because of the time, sorry.
Thank you. So Joy, you mentioned about socializing and build personal relationship at workplace. What's your thought on socializing with your peer, with your supervisors, or is there any? Basically, what's your guidelines about who you really socialize with?
I think you should try to socialize with everyone. I think that it's important. I would put the focus less on socializing. I think everyone says, oh, I hate happy hours because it's so awkward. Try to make a personal connection in whatever way is most comfortable for you. Maybe if everyone's meeting on Zoom these days, arrive to the Zoom call 2 minutes early and try to chit chat with people, just things like, oh, how was your weekend? Then you get to know, oh, you have kids. Oh, I have kids, or, find things that you have in common. I would try to arrive at Zooms a little bit early, try to stay a little bit later. Well, usually they just end on time, but in physical meetings, try to get there a little bit early, before the meeting starts, to chit chat, just like today, before we started, chit chat a little bit. But also don't just focus on your own company, focus on your industry or industries that you want to get into. And this is where LinkedIn is also very important. And LinkedIn may be very important also for relationships with your own company. People say, oh, this person, I thought this person was just a quiet mouse who sits in the corner. But wow, this person's thinking about things, and when you start to establish connections outside of your company and start establishing yourself as a thought leader over the next 6 months outside of your company, that will definitely increase your stature and respect inside your company. You want them to start worrying about that you might leave, right? If you can create FOMO for people inside your company, then you'll start to get more respect. And they will want to connect with you more.
Okay, yeah, we are not, because of the time, we are not going to accept any questions. So I just have one last question for Joy. Do you have any advice for us, especially for young people, on how can we improve our leadership skills and build up our leadership experience?
I'm going to leave you with one last thing, that I feel that as Chinese, we're always focusing on the gap between where we are and where we want to go. And I really hope that everyone takes a moment every single day to celebrate what you are doing that's great along this path. Okay, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And when we're always just focusing on the gap between where we are and where we want to go, then that results in a lot of shame. And the difference between shame and guilt is that you recognize that you did a behavior that was wrong. Shame is that you feel like there's something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you at all. There is two things that are wrong. A culture gap between the way you were raised and the way everyone else around you, the way the company works. And the second thing that's wrong is unconscious bias. So every step that you take every day to learn more about this and to counteract these things, to deepen your connection skills and to build your networks, every little thing that you do is a step forward and something worth celebrating. I think as adults, we get so used to criticizing ourselves and looking at the gap between where we are and where we want to be, that we forget to stop and celebrate, And I think for inspiration, what does Serena Williams do when she hits a good point? She doesn't think, oh, I could have done that better. She thinks, yes. So I hope that every one of us, multiple times a day, because this stuff is really hard. So when you do something, when you speak up at a meeting, whereas in the past you didn't, or when you greet someone with a big smile, or when you do something, any little step that you take towards in the right direction, towards taking down that glass ceiling, towards making your career better, making yours stronger, just do that, Serena, yes. Because I think that celebrating ourselves is something that's really, really important. And that's a great skill to learn.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, Joy. That's a great advice, to appreciate ourselves and celebrate ourselves. Yeah. Now, because, we have reached the end of our event, please, let's ask Xin to give us a close of this event.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Jing, and thanks, Joy, for spending your time and hosting this event. I think that's great information, great value for us to discuss on this, very important topic. And many of us are looking for answers, suggestions, guidance from that. And I really appreciate Joy and Jing, you share your perspective. And we truly appreciate for all the audience, all the alumni and the alumni from the Chinese Universities Alumni Association and also the greater Chinese and Asian communities. Thank you all. And we are looking forward to future opportunities to invite Joy and Jing again and to conduct more of similar workshops and so on. So stay in touch.
Yeah, and also thank our brother 学长大兴李大兴师兄providing the Zoom support to this event. Thank you very much, 大兴.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy. Very wonderful presentation. I enjoyed it very much.
Great. I loved being with all of you. You all are so talented and so inspiring. And I really, I hope that we can stay in touch and that you can share your wins with me, your small wins and your big wins. If you want to keep chatting with me or attending my trainings, you're welcome to join us every Tuesday. You can just look at my website to see where to sign up.
Oh,
Good
get
night,
connect
everyone.
to Joy through LinkedIn.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay,
Jean,
thank you.
Thank you,
Joy.
Jean.
Thank you, everyone.